Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm excited to share my favorite video settings for the Nikon Z6 Mark III. Now whether you're a beginner just getting started or an enthusiast looking to step up your video game, these settings have helped me to get the best out of my Nikon Z6 Mark III. I'll break down my favorite settings, explain why I use them, and show you how to customize your camera to fit your shooting style. So, if you're ready to capture some cinematic footage with the Nikon Z6 Mark III, well, stay tuned and let's dive in. Now, before we get started, I do want to let you know that we're going to be covering 3 different bases in terms of the video setting for the Nikon Z6 Mark III. The first one is going to be the settings that I use for very quick turnaround and low amount of video editing necessary. So basically almost straight out of camera. And that's what I use for these vlog videos. That's right, for YouTube, this is the settings I'll be using. That'll be the first setting. The next one is kind of the middle of the road. It's usually for my run and gun video projects, so event videography, stuff like that, where I want some latitude, but I don't want to be in my room all day editing and color correcting my footage, but still produces a high quality results. Now the third one is the creme de la creme. I want the best that I can get out of the Nikon Z6 Mark III, as well as to be able to repurpose the video for different formats, whether it be horizontal or vertical content. The first video settings I'm going to be going over is for creating YouTube videos. So first off, of course, as you know, I have the Nikon Z6 Mark III right now, and I have the Nikon Z 50mm f1.2 lens. Now, I like to always make sure when I create YouTube videos to create some compression and separation from the background when possible. So I tend to shoot at f1.8 to f2.0. Generally, when you see my talking head videos, they are shot at f2.0. Today it's 1.8. Now for the settings, I shoot at 24 frames a second, and I shoot at 1/50th of a shutter speed and ISO 100. That's what I'm doing today, but I have created videos in the past where ISOs have been brought up to as high as 640. I tend to not like going above 640 in the ISO. If that's the case, I always just boost up the brightness of the light. So with all that said, I do, when it comes to my video, I shoot at 4K, H.265, 10-bit video, which provides me the latitude to push and pull the colors, the highlights, and the shadows. And since I'm shooting at 4K and I edit on a 1080 timeline, it allows me to punch in and punch out on the video, so I don't have too many jump cuts throughout the entire video. Now for autofocus, I use autofocus AFF with human eye detect on. And because Nikon Z6 III's autofocus, I can easily trust this system to make sure that I'm constantly in focus. It's really great for creating these talking heads as you see right now. Now, ever since I've gotten this camera, and every YouTube video I've created has been with this camera, so you can honestly tell by, so the proof is in the pudding. It is accurate and it gets me every time. Now, that's for autofocus. For white balance, I currently have it matched to the light that I'm using right here as the key light, which is the Neewer S150C LED light. That's set to 6100 Kelvin. I have the camera set to 6100 Kelvin to match the white balance right there. And that's currently the settings that I use to produce these YouTube videos. Now, there are a lot of times where I need a setting that matches my ability to be very flexible in terms of dynamic range, but also doesn't bog me down here in front of my desk to do all the editing. That's where this next setting comes in. This setting is what I call my video run and gun settings. So it's somewhat similar to my YouTube settings, but a little bit more latitude in for post-production. So this is what it is. First is I set it to 4K, H.265, 10-bit again. And I don't switch to ProRes quite yet because I want to be able to maximize my storage. So a lot of times when I do run and gun, I am out in the field. I may be in a hotel for a day or two, etc. I want to make sure I maximize the amount of space that I can have on the hard drives, especially not only when I'm traveling, but when I get home. So I stay at 4K H.265 10-bit video, but now I switch the video color tone to N-Log. N-Log is going to be really opens up the door for you to really push and pull the colors and the dynamic range of the Nikon Z6 Mark III. It's a world of a difference. In my YouTube settings, I tend to shoot at standard picture at the standard tone versus N-Log, because I can flip these videos much faster. I won't have to be editing for hours, color grading for skin tone and everything else. Now, my run and gun situation, sometimes I need that latitude. Sometimes I don't get the light I need, so therefore I have to readjust it later on in post. So N-Log is going to provide me that dynamic range to really either get back the shadows or tone down the highlights later on in post. And more than likely, that's what I'm going to have to do, or even mess with the noise and denoise and etc. N-Log is going to provide me more flexibility. Here's the thing with the autofocus. I actually recently keep it again on autofocus F. So it's giving me continuous kind of autofocus, but also with face detect. And because of the touch screen on the back of the camera, I actually change and let the camera know what's the priority in terms of focusing. So if I have multiple subjects, I'm actually pressing the flip screen on the faces that are a priority. Now, what I'm really impressed with the Nikon Z6 Mark III's autofocus is how fast it switches from the foreground to the background whenever I need it to focus on a particular subject. Now, for better accuracy, I also adjust the size of the focus priority box, and I actually make it to a small, or sometimes I start off with large, but then I also bring it to a small as well if it's having a little bit of hard time because there's multiple faces within a subject. Now, here's a little secret. If you do have multiple subjects in your frame, it's going to prioritize the one that's closest to the camera off top. That's why I make sure I'm ready to press that back screen to make sure it stays exactly where I need it. Not only that, it's going to prioritize whatever's in the box as well. So keep that in mind as well too. Now, in terms of video settings, again, I'm shooting at 24 frames a second. Now, depending on the kind of run and gun footage, let's say if I'm filming someone doing athletic stuff, I may shoot at 60 frames, but in general, if I'm just doing like a corporate event, I'm going to be shooting at 24 frames. So therefore, my shutter speed is going to be 1/50th of a second. And now the ISO may ride a little bit higher than usual, just depending on the amount of ambient lighting that's in the space that I'm filming in. And as far as my aperture, I actually like shooting at f4. Okay, when you get to 1.8 or 2.0, sometimes that separation actually isolates the subject too much, in which they're not a part of what's going on in the environment that they're in. So if they're at a corporate event and you're capturing them talking, f4, I believe, when you zoom in, let's say using a 24-120 f4 lens, which is one of my favorite run and gun lenses to use due to the versatility, that f4 really does a great job of compressing them because you're zooming in. And so it does create that separation of your subject and the environment, but also gives you latitude in terms of focusing. And there's more depth of field for the lens to focus. Now, here is my final settings that I use when shooting video with the Nikon Z6 Mark III. Now, this is what I call the creme de la creme. This is what I want the best of the best out of the Nikon Z6 Mark III. So, for documentary work, let's say talking head commercial work, stuff like that, where I need as much as I can get out of this camera, these are the settings I'd be using. So first is I want to shoot at 6K. Since this camera could do 6K, I want the most I can get out of it. So we're going to be shooting at 6K. But now with the color tone, this time I'm going to be using NRAW. So I get the maximum amount of dynamic range that I can out of the footage I plan on shooting. And that's very important because when I'm shooting commercial work or let's say documentary or talking heads, testimonials, skin tones, like I got to get the skin tone right as well as the lighting right. Now the lighting is going to really depend on how I set the scene, like I did right now. But the skin tone adjustment, that's where the NRAW is really going to be a blessing for you later on to adjust. Now, shooting at 6K with the Nikon Z6III, as you know, means I can repurpose this footage for my client for vertical videos or short form videos for TikTok and Instagram Reels, or I can just use it for their website. I can edit on a 1080 timeline, a 4K timeline, and still have plenty of room to recrop and reposition the video that I'm shooting in 6K. Now, as far as autofocus, it's still, I actually shoot at manual when it comes to talking heads or documentary style videos and stuff like that, because I want accuracy. I don't want any chance. I set it and forget it. The client tends to not be moving. They're sitting on a stool like I'm doing now, and I'm behind the camera. Therefore, I can precisely set the autofocus. And with the peak focusing that you get as a feature in this camera, you know exactly where they are focused or what part of the face they're focused on, and you can set it and forget it and just keep on recording. As far as shutter speed, I'm shooting at 24 frames, so therefore 1/50th of a second. And depending on what I'm going with, actually a lot of talking heads that I do, I shoot at f2. Okay, that's just me. I shoot at f2 a lot of times, and for my tighter shots, I tend to, let's say camera B, I tend to use f4. That's just me because it's tighter in. I don't want as much shadow depth of field. You notice it a lot more, so I tend to shoot a little bit more closed down. So f4, maybe 5.6. Okay, that's what I do for camera B. But for camera A, I tend to go straight to 2.0, and ISO, again, is going to be determined on the environment and how much shadows I do want to have entering into the camera. Now, yes, I'm shooting at NRAW, but I got to edit this stuff later. So of course I'm trying to strive for the lowest amount of ISO as possible. But sometimes if I don't have 1,000-watt light, like this is a 150-watt light, I'm going to have to ride the ISO up a little bit. So in my last previous testimonial, I think I was doing ISO 400, and the video footage looked amazing. No one noticed a thing, and my clients were just happy with the results that were coming out of that footage. Now, again, I didn't say these are the perfect settings for those scenarios. The point of the video today is to share with you the settings that I go to, that I have saved on the user presets in the camera for the scenarios that I use. Now, I definitely would like to hear what you think about the settings that I use for the scenarios and what you would do differently if it would be. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free. Post your comments down below. Of course, I'll leave a link to the Nikon Z6 Mark III for you to check out for yourself. And if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more, don't forget to press that like, that share, that subscribe, and you already know, hit that bell icon to get notifications for my upcoming content. I'm Robert Silver, and until next time, keep shooting and stay creative.